Welcome, seeker of stories, to a journey through the heart of history's most profound loves. From the idealized longing of Dante for his Beatrice, echoing through ancient Florence, to Petrarch's sonnets born of unrequited devotion, we've explored love's tender ache. We then plunged into the passionate, perilous desires of Henry VIII for Anne Boleyn, a love that shattered kingdoms, and witnessed Elizabeth I's quiet sacrifice for duty, even as her heart belonged to Robert Dudley. We felt the crushing grief of Queen Victoria after losing her beloved Albert, and the tragic, defiant escape of Rudolph and Mary in their final embrace. Our path culminates with the radiant intellectual bond of Marie and Pierre Curie, a love that illuminated the universe. If these tales of human connection, of triumphs and heartbreaks woven into the fabric of time, resonate with your spirit, please consider liking this video, subscribing to our channel, and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. Let these stories guide you to a peaceful rest.
My dear listener, close your eyes. Let the whispers of a distant past cradle your senses, transporting you to a time when intellect burned brighter than any candle, yet the heart's desires could ignite a blaze even the church's mightiest fires couldn't extinguish. Tonight, we begin our journey in the heart of 12th century Paris, a city of winding cobblestone streets, towering cathedrals and cloisters where knowledge was both revered and feared. It was here, amidst the hushed reverence of scholarly pursuit, that two souls, brilliant and incandescent, collided in a love as profound as it was tragic. A love that would lead to a secret marriage, a brutal act of vengeance, and letters penned from the depths of monastic confinement, letters that still scream with the agony of a bond violently severed, yet eternally unyielding. Imagine for a moment a vow whispered in the dark, stolen breaths under the weight of sacred stone, binding two minds far more than any chain. Imagine the sheer audacity of intellect defying dogma, passion rebelling against prohibition. Now conjure the image of a body broken, not by war, but by a lover's choice, a scholar's ambition, and a guardian's wrath. Can you feel the ghostly ache of separation, the gnawing internal conflict of souls torn between divine calling and earthly desire? This is no fairy tale ending. This is the raw, visceral truth of history, of a love so potent it fractured lives and echoed across centuries, demanding to be heard. We begin with Heloise and Abelard, their story a haunting prelude to the eternal echoes of agony you are about to witness. I remember her, Heloise. Even now, centuries later, her image remains vivid in the annals of memory, a beacon of defiance in an age that sought to dim women's minds. She wasn't merely beautiful, though beauty she possessed in abundance. A delicate frame, eyes that held the wisdom of ancient texts, and a spirit as sharp as any philosopher's quill. What truly set her apart was her insatiable hunger for knowledge, a rare and startling passion for learning Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, a command of logic that could outwit the most seasoned theologians. She lived with her uncle, Canon Fulgert, a man who, despite his clerical duties, harbored immense pride in his niece's extraordinary gifts. He longed for her to shine, perhaps never fully grasping the perilous path he was paving for her, for them both. Heloise, in that bustling city, was an anomaly, a comet streaking across the intellectual firmament, destined to draw the gaze of the brightest star. That star was Peter Abelard. Oh, how can I describe him without invoking the very pride that ultimately sealed his fate? He was, by all accounts, a phenomenon, a philosopher whose dialectical skills were legendary, a theologian whose radical ideas challenged the very foundations of scholasticism, and a lecturer whose charisma drew thousands of students from across Europe. His mind was a labyrinth of brilliance, his arguments honed to perfection, and his voice, I imagine, could sway the most stubborn of souls. He strode through Paris with an arrogance born of unchallenged genius, believing himself untouchable, above the petty rules that bound ordinary men. He was, quite simply, the intellectual titan of his age, and his fame had reached the ears of Canon Fulbert, who, blinded by ambition for his niece, sought Abelard to tutor Heloise. The arrangement, at first, seemed innocent enough, a master instructing a prodigious pupil. Abelard, accustomed to the eager but often clumsy minds of his male students, found himself utterly captivated by Heloise. Imagine, if you will, the hushed intensity of their study sessions, the flickering lamplight casting long shadows across ancient manuscripts. Abelard, initially condescending, gradually found himself in awe of her quick grasp, her insightful questions, her ability to not merely absorb but to challenge. She was his intellectual equal, a mirror reflecting his own brilliance, yet distinct in her own luminous way. He would explain complex philosophical concepts, and she would not only comprehend them, but offer her own elegant counter-arguments, pushing him to refine his thoughts. This intellectual dance, so intoxicating and rare, was the prelude to a far more dangerous ballet. Their minds entwined first, then their hearts followed, irrevocably. It began subtly, a prolonged gaze, a shared smile, a tremor in the voice during a particularly heated debate. Abelard, the famed logician, found his own logic failing him in the face of this unexpected, consuming passion. He who had always prided himself on his self-control and devotion to academic life felt an unfamiliar fire ignite within him. Heloise, so disciplined in her studies, discovered a vulnerability she never knew she possessed. The world outside their study chamber began to fade, replaced by a universe where only their intellects and burgeoning desires existed. It was a slow burn, a silent crescendo, until the unspoken became undeniable. The very act of teaching, of exchanging ideas, became a thinly veiled courtship, each lesson a lover's embrace. Their secret, like all fervent secrets, was a fragile thing, constantly threatened by discovery. They lived under the same roof, their shared passion burning brightly in the quiet hours of the night, defying the watchful eyes of Canon Fulbert. Imagine the thrill, the exquisite agony of their clandestine meetings, the hushed footsteps down creaking hallways, the whispered confessions under the cloak of darkness, the desperate yearning in each stolen kiss. Every touch was an act of defiance, every moment together a precious, perilous treasure. They were like two stars pulled into an irresistible orbit, knowing that any deviation from their course could result in a catastrophic collision, yet unable to break free. Heloise, in her later letters, would speak of this time with a profound love and bitter regret, recalling how they gave themselves entirely to love under the pretext of study. She confessed the depth of her devotion, a love so consuming that she would choose him, even if it meant abandoning the world. She wrote, "I loved you alone, and not only for your knowledge, but also for your person." This was no fleeting infatuation. It was a bond forged in the crucible of intellect and unbridled desire. A day-to-day agony of concealment that only deepened their connection. But secrets, especially those so vehemently forbidden, rarely remain hidden forever. Canon Fulbert, initially oblivious or perhaps unwilling to see, eventually began to suspect. The rumors circulating through the cloisters, the hushed whispers about his brilliant niece and the arrogant philosopher, grew too loud to ignore. The air in their home grew heavy with unspoken tension, the joy of their shared moments now tinged with fear. When Fulbert finally confronted them, the fragile world Heloise and Abelard had built around themselves shattered. The revelation was a cataclysm. Heloise was pregnant. In a desperate attempt to salvage her reputation and to legitimize their child, Astrolabe, they secretly married. It was a hurried, somber ceremony, a vow taken not in celebration, but in the shadow of impending scandal, a desperate plea for a semblance of normalcy. This act, however, was not enough to appease the fury of Fulbert, whose pride had been irrevocably wounded, his honor stained.
The punishment, when it came, was swift and horrifically brutal. In a fit of vengeful rage, Fulbert hired men to castrate Abelard. The physical mutilation was devastating, but the psychological torment was arguably even more profound. Abelard, the brilliant, charismatic scholar, was now a broken man, stripped of his virility, his pride, his very identity. The public humiliation was unbearable. He sought refuge in a monastery, seeking solace in a life of religious devotion, a desperate attempt to escape the echoes of his shattered life. Heloise, in turn, out of loyalty and a love that transcended earthly desires, joined a convent, not as a nun by calling, but as a sacrifice. She cut her beautiful hair, donned the habit, and buried her living self within the silent walls, her heart still beating fiercely for the man she could never truly have. This was the ultimate dilemma, the wrenching internal conflict, a love so powerful it defied societal norms, yet utterly crushed by them. It was after this devastating separation, from within the confines of their respective monastic walls, that their story truly became immortal. Their letters, penned across the chasm of their forced separation, became the enduring testament to their unyielding grip on each other's hearts. Heloise's letters, in particular, are raw, searing, filled with a daunting longing and a heartbreaking honesty. She poured out her soul, questioning divine justice, lamenting their fate, yet never denying her love for Abelard. If by any chance you have forgotten me, do not hesitate to remind me of the reason for your neglect. She spoke of the constant agony of memory, of how, even in prayer, her thoughts would drift to him, to their past, to the life they could have had. Her words were not those of a pious nun finding peace, but of a woman tormented by a love that refused to die, a love that was a cursed vow she could neither keep nor break. Abelard's replies, initially more reserved and theological, gradually revealed his own pain and remorse. He sought to guide her toward spiritual solace, but even his scholarly prose could not entirely mask the lingering ache of their shared past. He called her my sister in Christ, once dearest to me in the world, a heartbreaking acknowledgment of what they once were, tempered by the stark reality of their present. He urged her to find peace in God, but the eternal echoes of their earthly passion resonated through every line. These letters, meticulously preserved, are not merely historical artifacts, but windows into two souls racked with internal conflict, torn between sacred vows and profane desires, between faith and forbidden love. They reveal the sheer human spirit, its capacity for both profound devotion and excruciating suffering. The depth of their philosophical arguments, interwoven with their deeply personal confessions, creates a unique tapestry of intellectual brilliance and emotional devastation. So, dear listener, we leave Heloise and Abelard for now, their voices still vibrating across the centuries through their eloquent letters. Their story is a powerful reminder that love, in its purest, most intellectual, and most carnal forms, can leave unhealable wounds, yet its agonizing echoes can also resonate with breathtaking beauty, shaping not just lives, but the very fabric of history. It is a tale of unyielding grip, a love that even when brutally severed, refused to release its hold. And as you drift further into the embrace of sleep, let the lingering whispers of their daunting longing remind you of love's enduring power, even in the face of absolute despair. The currents of history, much like the gentle river Seine that flows through Paris, carry many such stories, each with its own rhythm of passion and pain. And it is to another of these currents, a journey into the heart of queens and kings, that we shall turn in our next chapter, where love and power intertwine in a dance that reshaped empires. Rest now and let the echoes guide you.
As the echoes of Eloise's enduring sorrow fade into the quietude of your mind, allow me to guide you to another powerful current in the river of history. Our journey now takes us from the hushed cloisters of intellectual despair to the thunderous halls of power, where love was not a private whisper, but a public declaration, a political alliance, and ultimately a battleground. This is the tale of a queen whose spirit was as vast as the lands she ruled, and a king whose ambition carved an empire, only to see it splintered by the very ties meant to bind it. This is the story of Eleanor of Aquitaine and Henry II, a saga of the crown and the tears, where the agony was not just of the heart, but of a kingdom. Picture a woman,
not merely born to privilege, but to an inheritance that would change the map of Europe. This was Eleanor of Aquitaine, Duchess of Aquitaine and Countess of Portois in her own right. She commanded vast territories in southwestern France, lands fertile and rich, brimming with culture, troubadours, and a spirit of independence that mirrored her own. She was more than just a powerful heiress. She was a woman of formidable intellect, dazzling beauty, and an indomitable will. She had already worn a crown, having been Queen of France through her marriage to Louis VII. But that union, pious and proper though it was, lacked the fire, the dynamism that Eleanor craved. It was a marriage of duty, not of destiny. A slow-burning ember instead of the roaring blaze her spirit demanded. She needed a partner, not a ward. A king who could match her ambition, not merely contain it. And in the restless winds of change, such a king was rising. Across the Channel, and indeed across the northern lands of France, strode Henry Plantagenet. He was a man forged in the crucible of ambition, a whirlwind of energy and strategic brilliance. Duke of Normandy and Count of Anjou, he was younger than Eleanor, but his vitality was boundless, his eyes alight with the hunger for power. He was not yet a king, but the scent of the English throne, tantalizingly close through his mother's Matilda's lineage, clung to him like a second skin. He was robust, red-headed, and renowned for his almost manic energy, his restless mind always strategizing, always moving. Where Louis of France was reserved and pious, Henry was dynamic and pragmatic. He was everything Eleanor's first husband was not. He was the force of nature she had, perhaps, always subconsciously sought. Their meeting, often romanticized, was probably more a calculated convergence of power than a lightning bolt of pure emotion, yet the spark was undeniable. Eleanor, newly annulled from her marriage to Louis, met Henry, fresh from his conquests. It was less a courtship and more a negotiation between two formidable powers, two grand designs. But oh, what a negotiation it must have been! The sophisticated, experienced queen, with vast territories and a keen political mind, encountering the raw, surging power of the young duke. There was an undeniable magnetism, a mutual recognition of ambition and intellect. They married within weeks of her annulment in 1152, a whirlwind union that sent shockwaves through Europe. Their marriage was a statement, a consolidation of immense power, creating an empire that stretched from the Scottish borders to the Pyrenees. It was a union not just of bodies, but of territories, of destinies entwined, bound by a shared hunger for dominance. For a time, it was a reign of unparalleled glory, a period historians often dub the Angevin Empire. Henry, now King Henry II of England, and Eleanor, his queen, presided over a court that hummed with energy and intellectual fervor. They traveled tirelessly across their vast dominions, from England to Normandy, from Anjou to Aquitaine, administering justice, consolidating power. Their alliance, though rooted in strategy, blossomed into a formidable partnership. Eleanor brought not only her lands but her cultural refinement, her administrative prowess, and her vast network of contacts. Henry brought his military genius, his legal reforms, and his relentless drive. They produced 8 children, a strong lineage for their burgeoning empire, a testament to their union. There was a genuine respect, perhaps even affection, in their collaboration. I can almost see them seated side by side discussing strategy, their minds engaged in a complex dance of governance. This was not the quiet contemplative love of Abelard and Eloise. This was love writ large, across maps and battlefields, a love measured in kingdoms gained and power consolidated. For a time, they were the unrivaled power couple of Europe, a living testament to the adage that two are stronger than one, especially if those two are crowned heads. Yet, even in the gilded cages of royalty, the seeds of discord can take root. The very ambition that drew them together eventually drove them apart. Henry, tireless and demanding, began to take mistresses, a common practice for kings, but one that Eleanor, with her fierce pride and independent spirit, found increasingly intolerable. His focus shifted from a shared vision to an almost obsessive centralization of power, often at the expense of Eleanor's own authority within Aquitaine. The early respect began to erode, replaced by resentment, and the children, once a symbol of their unity, became pawns in an escalating game of power. Eleanor, who had nurtured a vibrant court culture in Aquitaine, found herself increasingly marginalized, her independent spirit chafing under Henry's iron rule. The pain began to fester, a slow-burning ember of disillusionment in a heart that had once beaten with such fierce passion. She who had given so much felt herself being slowly, systematically diminished. The whispers of infidelity, the growing political disagreements, slowly chipped away at the foundation of their once formidable partnership, leaving gaping cracks where love had once been. The rift widened irrevocably with the Great Revolt of 1173. Their eldest sons, Henry the Young King, Richard, later the Lionheart, and Geoffrey, grew restless under their father's authoritarian grip. They demanded more power, more autonomy, more recognition. And who did they turn to for support? Their mother, Eleanor. Here lies a profound twist of fate, a chilling reversal of roles. The queen who had brought Henry so much now actively encouraged her sons to rebel against him. It was a desperate act, born of deep danvat and personal injury. Imagine the agonizing choice she faced: remain a subjugated queen or support her own flesh and blood in their fight for independence, even if it meant tearing apart the empire she had helped build. Her loyalty, once given freely to Henry, now shifted to her sons, seeing in their rebellion a reflection of her own desire for freedom, for dignity. It was a choice that spoke volumes about her shattered emotional state, the bitter taste of betrayal that had soured her heart. She was no longer Henry's queen in spirit, but a powerful matriarch, willing to sacrifice the semblance of a family for the fierce independence she valued above all else. This was the moment their love, if it ever was truly love in the romantic sense, irrevocably died, replaced with the cold calculus of power and personal grievance. The rebellion failed, and the consequences for Eleanor were dire. Henry, ever the ruthless pragmatist, could not forgive her role. For 16 long years, from 1173 until his death in 1189, Eleanor was held under house arrest, moved from one royal fortress to another across England. 16 years of solitude, of watching her children, her empire, and her own life unfold from behind gilded bars. Imagine the daunting loneliness, the gnawing regret she must have felt. Did she replay the moments of their fiery youth, the shared ambitions, the triumphs? Or did she dwell on the bitter betrayals, the endless power struggles that led her to this gilded prison? Every day was a testament to the unyielding grip of Henry's power, but also to the day-to-day agony of her own choices. Her spirit, though confined, remained unbroken. She spent her time reading, perhaps reflecting on the ephemeral nature of power and the enduring sting of a broken heart. This long imprisonment was a slow, deliberate form of torture, designed not to break her body, but to crush her spirit. Yet Eleanor's spirit, much like the very stones of her castles, endured. Finally, in 1189, Henry II died. The news of his death reached Eleanor, still under confinement. It must have been a moment of profound, complex emotion. Relief? Grief? A strange sense of liberation? With Henry gone, her favorite son, Richard the Lionheart, ascended to the throne, and the first act of his reign was to release his mother. Eleanor, though in her late 60s, emerged from her long captivity not diminished, but perhaps even stronger, certainly wiser. Her return to power was a brief but glorious resurgence. She acted as regent for Richard while he was on crusade, traversing Europe, negotiating treaties, and showing the same formidable political skill she possessed in her youth. It was a fleeting reunion with the world she had shaped, a final glimpse of the power she once wielded with such authority. She saw Richard, her beloved son, return home, and when he died, she helped ensure the succession of her youngest son, John. Her influence, even at the very end of her life, remained immense, a testament to her enduring strength. And so we conclude our contemplation of Eleanor and Henry. Their story, far from being a simple romance, is a complex tapestry woven with threads of ambition, power, betrayal, and a deep, enduring agony that resonated through their lives and the lives of their children. Eleanor of Aquitaine stands as an immortal figure, a woman who bent the arc of history to her will, a queen whose tears were often shed not for lost love, but for lost power, lost agency, lost freedom. Her relationship with Henry II serves as a poignant reminder that even the most formidable alliances, born of strategic brilliance and mutual ambition, can crumble under the weight of personal desires and unchecked power. The eternal echoes of their anguish are not just whispers of a broken marriage, but the thunderous reverberations of a shattered dynasty, a tragic testament to the unyielding grip of history on the human heart. As you drift deeper into the comforting embrace of sleep, consider the profound choices faced by those who wear the crown, the sacrifices they make, the loves they pursue, and the bitter tears they shed, often in private, for decisions that shape nations. For in the next chapter, we will turn our gaze to a different kind of love, one that transcends the earthly realm entirely, a love idealized to the point of pain, where a poet's soul found its muse in a woman he could barely touch, yet who became his guiding light through the very gates of hell. Rest now, and let these echoes settle deep within you. As the echoes of royal conflicts and imprisoned queens recede, let your mind drift to a different realm of love, one where the battlefield is the soul and the crown is woven from laurel and thorns. Our journey now leads to the heart of the 13th century Florence, a city of vibrant artistry and fierce political strife, where cobbled streets hummed with trade and innovation, and the Arno River reflected a sky pregnant with both beauty and turbulent change. It was here, in this crucible of culture, that a love was born not of earthly touch, but of a gaze, a whisper, a spiritual awakening that would transform a man's anguish into the very architecture of heaven and hell. This is the story of Dante Alighieri and Beatrice Portinari, where love became the very canvas of creation and agony transcended into art. Imagine for a moment a young boy with eyes that saw beyond the mundane, a soul exquisitely sensitive to beauty, to truth, to the very essence of form. This was Dante Alighieri, a son of Florence, destined to be exiled from its gates, yet forever bound to its spirit. Even in his tender years, a certain gravity clung to him, a profound capacity for feeling that would later fuel his monumental works. He breathed the air of a city bustling with merchants, artists, and scholars, a place where the seeds of the Renaissance were already stirring. His world was one of nascent intellectual curiosity, but also of simmering political rivalries that would shape his fate. He was a youth with a poet's heart, unknowingly awaiting the spark that would ignite his entire being, a catalyst not of conquest, but of pure ethereal illumination. That spark arrived not in a grand encounter, but in a fleeting, incandescent moment. I speak of the first time Dante saw Beatrice Portinari. They were still children then. The setting was likely a spring festival, perhaps a May Day celebration where Florentine families mingled in their finest attire. There she stood, adorned in a crimson dress, radiating an innocence and grace that struck Dante to his core. It wasn't a child's infatuation, it was a profound recognition, a sudden baring of the soul that transcended their tender years. In that instant, time seemed to pause, and the cacophony of the festival faded into a silent hum. He later described it as the moment his spirit of life trembled so violently that it appeared in the least pulses. It was a moment of epiphany, a turning point that carved an indelible mark upon his consciousness, setting the trajectory for a love that would defy the conventional bounds of reality. This was not a physical attraction, but a spiritual revelation, a glimpse into something so pure, so divine that it reshaped the very landscape of his inner world. From that day forward, Beatrice became his guiding star, his eternal muse. Their encounters were exceedingly rare, perhaps only a handful of times in their lives, often little more than a shared glance or a brief, formal greeting in the street. Yet for Dante, each fleeting moment was an eternity, each silent acknowledgment a profound communion. This was not a love that sought physical intimacy or worldly possession. Indeed, Beatrice married another, Simone de' Bardi, and lived a conventional life for a woman of her standing. Dante himself later entered into an arranged marriage with Gemma Donati and had children, but his love for Beatrice remained utterly untarnished by these earthly realities. It was a love idealized, purified by distance and reverence, existing on a plane far above the mundane. He spent countless hours contemplating her, writing poems in her honor, dedicating his very being to understanding the divine beauty he perceived in her. His was a daunting longing, an insatiable thirst for a spiritual connection that could not be quenched by proximity. He sought solace in poetry, attempting to capture the ethereal essence of her being, a beauty that to him was a reflection of God's own grace. This idealization, while seemingly ethereal, held its own unique agony, the exquisite torment of an unrequited, unspoken devotion, a constant yearning for a spiritual union that remained just beyond reach. Then the unthinkable happened. In 1290, at the tender age of 24, Beatrice Portinari died. The news shattered Dante. It was a cataclysmic event, a spiritual earthquake that left him utterly bereft, plunged into a despair so profound it threatened to consume him whole. Imagine the raw, visceral pain of losing the very embodiment of purity and inspiration, even if that inspiration was largely a construct of your own mind. It was a grief that transcended the normal sorrow of bereavement, for with Beatrice's death, a part of Dante's soul, his connection to the divine, seemed to vanish. He describes falling into a profound state of mourning, neglecting his studies, withdrawing from the world. The vibrancy of Florence, once a source of joy, became a backdrop for his emptiness. This internal conflict was immense. The physical absence of his muse clashed with the eternal presence she held in his spirit. How could he continue when the very light that guided him had been extinguished? This moment marked a critical turning point, a descent into the very abyss of anguish that would ultimately fuel his greatest artistic triumph. It was from this deep chasm of sorrow that Dante found his most profound inspiration, transforming his pain into pure creative energy. His grief, rather than crushing him, became the very forge upon which he hammered out his immortal works. He first penned La Vita Nuova, the new life, a collection of poems and prose narrating his mystical love for Beatrice, even including the agonizing account of her death. This work was a testament to his spiritual journey, a prelude to the vast epic that would define his legacy. But it was the Divine Comedy, a colossal, intricate masterpiece of world literature, where Beatrice's influence and Dante's transcendent agony truly ascended. This monumental poem, an allegorical journey through hell, purgatory, and paradise, was Dante's spiritual quest for salvation and understanding, a quest inextricably linked to his lost love. In the Divine Comedy, Beatrice is not merely a memory or a symbol. She becomes Dante's ultimate guide, his divine wisdom. After Virgil, the embodiment of human reason, can lead him no further through the lower realms. It is Beatrice who descends from heaven to accompany him through paradise. She is light, she is truth, she is the embodiment of divine love and wisdom, leading him ever closer to the vision of God. This is the profound twist in their story. The woman who was physically absent from his life became his most potent presence in his greatest artistic creation. Her guiding hand, ethereal and symbolic, led him through the celestial spheres, answering his deepest theological and philosophical questions. Through her, he found not only solace, but revelation. Her initial beauty had awakened his soul. Her death had plunged him into the depths of despair, and her posthumous spiritual guidance lifted him to the heights of spiritual enlightenment. It was the ultimate sublimation of heartache into something timeless, universal. Thus, the love of Dante Alighieri and Beatrice Portinari stands as a towering monument to the unyielding grip of inspiration born from profound sorrow. Their story is not one of a conventional romance, but of an idealized, almost mystical connection that transcended the boundaries of life and death, shaping not just a man's life, but the entire course of Western literature. Beatrice, though she lived a short, seemingly ordinary life, became the eternal muse, her presence in Dante's heart and mind immortalized through his words. Her premature departure ignited an unbearable pain that Dante, through sheer force of will and genius, transformed into a universal narrative of sin, redemption, and divine love. The eternal echoes of agony in his verses are not merely laments for a lost beloved, but the very sounds of a soul wrestling with the deepest questions of existence, guided by the luminous memory of a woman. It is a testament to the extraordinary human capacity to transmute suffering into transcendent beauty, to find meaning and purpose even in the depths of despair. As you now drift into the tranquil depths of your sleep, let the whispers of Florence and the timeless verses of Dante guide your mind. Reflect on how love, in its purest, most idealized form, can both shatter and rebuild, leaving an indelible mark that extends far beyond mortal years.
The echoes of Florence, of a love idealized and agonizingly pure, now softly dissipate as we journey south through the sun-drenched landscapes of 14th-century Provence. Our destination, Avignon, a city of opulence and spiritual paradox, where the papacy had taken temporary residence, its grand palaces and bustling markets creating a vibrant, yet often corrupt tapestry of life. Imagine the scent of lavender carried on the breeze, the distant murmur of church bells, and the quiet rustle of parchment in the hands of scholars. It was here, in this city of earthly power and heavenly aspirations, that another soul, burdened by an exquisite sensitivity, would find his eternal muse, only to discover that the most profound love can also be the most tormenting. This is the story of Francesco Petrarch and Laura, a tale where the agony of unspoken devotion found its voice in the lyrical cry of the sonnet. He was Francesco Petrarch, a man whose name would become synonymous with the dawn of humanism, a scholar who breathed new life into classical learning, and a poet whose verses would sing across centuries. He was not born into wealth or nobility, but into a family driven by intellect and a sense of justice, often finding themselves at odds with the powerful. Petrarch possessed an intensely introspective nature, a restless spirit that yearned for beauty, for knowledge, and for a deeper understanding of the human condition. He devoured ancient texts, corresponded with kings and popes, and yearned for the literary glory of Rome. But beneath the veneer of the ambitious scholar, there beat a heart capable of immense, singular devotion.
He sought not only fame, but also an elusive truth, a connection that transcended the fleeting joys of the world. He walked the streets of Avignon, an intellectual giant, yet his soul remained unfulfilled, unknowingly waiting for the singular face that would unlock the floodgates of his deepest emotions. The moment arrived on a day steeped in spiritual significance, Good Friday, April 6th, 1327. Petrarch was attending morning service at the Church of Saint Claire in Avignon. The air was thick with solemnity, the scent of incense lingering, the light filtered through stained glass. And then he saw her, Laura. The world for him simply ceased to exist. It was not a thunderclap, but a profound, silent detonation within his soul. She was a vision of purity and grace. Her golden hair, her modest attire, the luminous serenity in her eyes, everything about her struck him with the force of an inexplicable, divine revelation. She was not adorned with jewels or ostentatious finery, yet her presence outshone all the grandeur of the papal court. This was not merely attraction, it was an epiphany, a sudden overwhelming certainty that this woman, this complete stranger, was destined to be the focus of his deepest affections, the embodiment of an ideal beauty he had only ever dreamed of. In that instant, his life was irrevocably cleaved into two, before Laura and after Laura. A fateful encounter, simple in its execution, yet cataclysmic in its impact, sealing his destiny to a love he knew, even then, was utterly beyond his grasp. For Petrarch, this was no fleeting infatuation. It was an unrequited love that became the very essence of his being, a joyous burden he carried for the rest of his life. Laura, as history tells us, was already married to a man named Hugues de Sade. She was a woman of virtue, seemingly untouched by Petrarch's fervent admiration, never reciprocating his passionate advances. Imagine the day-to-day agony of Petrarch, seeing her in the street, catching a fleeting glimpse in the market, exchanging a polite nod, each encounter a small, sharp shard of hope and despair. His love was a river that flowed relentlessly, finding no outlet, no embrace from its intended shore. He followed her from a distance, absorbed every detail of her presence, yet was condemned to perpetual yearning. This constant, unfulfilled longing became his companion, a relentless, gnawing ache in his soul. He dedicated himself to a solitary torment, an endless loop of adoration and frustration, pouring his heart into verses meant only for her, yet never truly reaching her. He described himself as being chained in love, acknowledging the bittersweet prison of his own choosing. This unfulfilled love, this daunting longing, became the single greatest wellspring of his artistic creation. Laura was not merely a woman, she transformed into his eternal obsession, a muse who haunted his every waking moment and invaded his dreams. Hundreds upon hundreds of sonnets poured from his pen, each one a testament to her beauty, her purity, and the excruciating pain of his devotion. He chronicled every nuance of his feelings, the rapture of seeing her, the anguish of her indifference, the desperate prayers for her acknowledgement, the bitter taste of jealousy when imagining her with her husband. These were not just love poems, they were a profound psychological study of unrequited passion, of a soul consumed by an unattainable ideal. He explored every facet of his internal conflict, the desire for worldly fame versus the purity of his love, the spiritual elevation she inspired versus the earthly torment she inflicted. His sonnets became his confessional, his lament, his desperate plea to the universe to understand the depth of his devotion. Through his art, he transcended the ordinary limits of love, transforming a personal heartache into a universal language of yearning. He built a monument to her, not in stone, but in words, an edifice of pure, concentrated emotion. Then the world was plunged into a new, horrific kind of agony. The Black Death, a plague of unimaginable devastation, swept across Europe in the mid-14th century, leaving death and despair in its wake. Cities were emptied, families annihilated, and the very fabric of society seemed to unravel. It was a time of pervasive fear, of the constant specter of death hovering over every soul. And on April 6, 1348, 21 years to the day after he first saw her, the news reached Petrarch. Laura had succumbed to the plague. The world, already reeling from pestilence, collapsed entirely for him. It was a searing, irreparable wound, a final crushing blow to a heart that had already known so much unfulfilled yearning. Imagine the desolation of that moment, the object of his entire poetic life, the distant star he had orbited for decades, suddenly extinguished. The pain of her physical absence, which had been a constant companion, now morphed into an entirely new, unbearable emptiness. The faint possibility of her ever returning his affection, a sliver of hope he had perhaps subconsciously clung to, vanished entirely. His muse was gone, and with her it felt as though his very capacity for poetry, for life itself, had departed. Yet, in a profound twist of enduring devotion, even Laura's death could not sever the unbreakable thread of Petrarch's love. Instead of silencing him, her absence became a new source of inspiration, albeit one steeped in deeper melancholy. He continued to write about her, transforming his grief into a series of post-mortem sonnets. Now his verses were filled with laments for her loss, meditations on the fleeting nature of life, and spiritual reflections on her ascension to heaven. He found solace in imagining her as an angel, guiding him from beyond the veil. This demonstrated the true, unyielding grip of his love. It transcended even the ultimate boundary of death. Her memory, far from fading, became an even more powerful, spiritual presence in his life. His continuing lamentations, his dialogues with her ghost in verse, solidified her place not just as his muse, but as a timeless symbol of idealized, unattainable beauty, leaving an indelible mark on the landscape of romantic literature. He showed the world that even a love that found no earthly reciprocation could be immortalized, its agony transformed into eternal art. The story of Petrarch and Laura is a poignant testament to the unyielding grip of an unrequited, idealized love. It reminds us that the most profound passions are not always those that find fulfillment in shared lives, but sometimes those that are forged in the crucible of longing and pain. Laura, through Petrarch's enduring devotion, became more than just a woman. She became a universal symbol of beauty and inspiration, a figure who sparked a literary revolution. Her story, infused with Petrarch's daunting longing and the eternal echoes of his anguish, forever resonates with the bittersweet beauty of unfulfilled desire. It is a powerful illustration of the human heart's infinite capacity for love, even when that love is a constant source of heartache, and how the deepest sorrows can give birth to the most enduring works of art. As the echoes of poets' agonizing, unrequited loves gently fade, our journey now plunges into a realm where desire was not merely a whispered verse, but a roaring furnace, capable of reshaping kingdoms and spilling blood. We arrive in the vibrant yet treacherous world of Tudor England, a stage set with magnificent palaces, bustling courtyards, and shadows where ambition and intrigue danced a perilous jig. Imagine the heavy scent of beeswax and old timber, the rustle of silk gowns, and the distant sound of trumpets announcing the arrival of a king. It was here, in this labyrinth of power and pretense, that a king's obsession for a woman would tear apart the very fabric of church and state, leaving behind a legacy drenched in both passion and profound sorrow. This is the story of Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII, where the throne itself became a witness to a love that shook the foundations of faith and ended in blood-stained agony. He was Henry VIII, a king carved from the very image of robust English power. In his youth, he was a Renaissance prince, athletic, intellectual, a composer of music, and fiercely devout, earning the title Defender of the Faith from the Pope himself. But beneath this dazzling exterior lay a will as unyielding as the Tower of London, a primal hunger for a male heir to secure his dynasty, and a volatile temper that, once ignited, could burn down everything in its path. He was a man accustomed to having his desires met, his pronouncements unchallenged. His court was a glittering spectacle, a magnet for the ambitious and the beautiful, a place where fortunes were made and lost on a king's whim. He reigned with an iron fist, his decrees shaping the very lives of his subjects. Yet for all his power, his greatest struggle would not be on a battlefield, but within the confines of his own passionate, demanding heart. A struggle that began with the arrival of a woman unlike any he had ever known. Into this opulent yet treacherous world stepped Anne Boleyn. She wasn't considered conventionally beautiful by the standards of her time, lacking the pale skin and blonde hair favored by many. But Anne possessed something far more potent, a quick wit that sparkled like a polished jewel, eyes that were dark and compelling, and modern intelligence honed by years spent in the sophisticated courts of France and the Netherlands, and an air of alluring defiance. She moved with an innate grace, debated with a sharp mind, and dressed with an elegance that made her stand out. She was not passive or demure. She challenged, she charmed, she captivated. When Henry VIII, the most powerful man in England, first encountered her amidst the swirling tides of his court, he was utterly, irrevocably mesmerized. It wasn't merely infatuation, it was a profound fascination, a hunger ignited by her unique spirit, a woman who seemed to promise not just an heir, but an intellectual equal, a passionate companion who could truly hold his gaze. What began as a king's desire quickly escalated into an all-consuming obsession, a tempest that swept away reason and tradition. Henry was married to Catherine of Aragon, a devout queen who had given him a daughter, Mary, but no living son. His conscience, fueled by biblical interpretation and a growing conviction that his marriage was cursed, convinced him he needed an annulment. Anne, with a calculated brilliance that matched his own fierce will, refused to become his mistress, demanding the ultimate prize, the crown. This refusal, this unyielding stance, only intensified Henry's desire, turning it into a feverish determination. The subsequent years were a maelstrom of diplomatic maneuverings, theological debates, and a furious clash with the mighty Roman Catholic Church. Imagine Henry's day-to-day agony, the gnawing frustration of a king denied his will, forced to challenge the very spiritual authority he had once defended. Yet his resolve, spurred by Anne's own adamant refusal to yield, only hardened. He broke with Rome, declared himself the supreme head of the Church of England, and in a move that sent shockwaves across Europe, finally married Anne in 1333. It was a love that literally tore apart the religious and political landscape of a continent, a testament to the destructive power of a monarch's passion.
The dream, however, was tragically short-lived. The fervent hope that Anne would provide the male heir, the very reason for this colossal upheaval, began to unravel with the birth of their first child. It was a daughter, Elizabeth. While healthy and bright, she was not the longed-for son. A whisper of disappointment, subtle at first, began to creep into the gilded chambers of the palace. Anne suffered miscarriages, each one a crushing blow, each one fueling Henry's growing anxiety about his dynasty. The initial dazzle of Anne's wit and charm, which had once enthralled him, now seemed to pale against the pressing need for a male successor. Henry's gaze, restless and demanding, began to stray, settling on Jane Seymour, a woman whose demure nature was a stark contrast to Anne's fiery spirit. Anne, acutely aware of the chilling precedent set by Catherine of Aragon, felt the tightening noose of fear and isolation. Her once unassailable position began to crumble. The realization must have been a sickening twist of fate. She had overthrown a queen for love, only to find herself walking the very same precipice of rejection and uncertainty. The vibrant queen who had once held Henry's heart captive now felt the chilling chill of his retreating affection, a slow burn of betrayal consuming her world. The final act of this royal tragedy was a descent into pure agony and horrifying injustice. Henry, now desperate for a legitimate male heir and enchanted by Jane Seymour, needed a way to rid himself of Anne. He engineered a monstrous plot, concocting a series of fabricated charges: adultery, incest with her own brother, and treason. The sheer audacity and cruelty of these accusations are chilling. Anne,
once the epitome of royal grace, found herself imprisoned in the Tower of London, the very fortress that symbolized royal power, now her gilded cage of doom. Imagine her utter helplessness, the raw, searing pain of betrayal from the man for whom she had sacrificed everything. Her cries of innocence were drowned out by the clamor of a court eager to please its king. She was tried, swiftly and without true justice, by a court packed with her enemies and former allies. Her brother, too, was condemned on equally baseless charges. The threads of her life, once woven with such vibrant ambition, were now unraveling into a nightmare. This was the terrifying, unyielding grip of a king's absolute power, turning a once cherished queen into a disposable obstacle. The morning of May 19, 1536, dawned bleak and final. Anne Boleyn was led to the scaffold erected within the Tower precincts. The common people of London were kept away. Only a select few witnesses, fearful and silent, were permitted to watch this grim spectacle. History records Anne's composure in her final moments. She spoke calmly, not accusing her king, but accepting her fate, urging prayers for him. This was her final chilling twist of defiance, to die with dignity, to retain a semblance of control in the face of absolute powerlessness. As the French executioner, specially brought in for his skill, raised his sword, Anne knelt. The swift, silent fall of the blade marked the end of a life that had ignited a revolution, transformed a nation, and paid the ultimate price for love and ambition. Her very blood, spilled on that execution block, became another permanent stain on the crown she so desperately sought. The story of Anne Boleyn and Henry VIII remains one of history's most potent and painful narratives, a stark testament to the destructive power of human desire when wielded by absolute authority. It is a chilling reminder of how swiftly love can curdle into contempt, and how readily power can be used to annihilate inconvenient truths. Anne's legacy, still debated and reinterpreted through centuries, is inextricably linked to the seismic shifts she helped unleash: the English Reformation, the rise of Elizabeth I, her agony, her desperate struggle for a son, her brutal end, are the eternal echoes of a love bought with a crown and paid for with blood. It is a tale of unyielding grip, where the grip of a king's will proved stronger than any bond of affection, leaving behind a wake of shattered lives and a throne forever stained by tears and betrayal. As the echoes of a king's destructive passion and a queen's tragic fall gently recede, allow your thoughts to drift into the intricate tapestry of a different Tudor love story. Our journey now leads us deeper into the labyrinthine world of the English court, a place of dazzling splendor and whispered conspiracies, where every smile could hide a dagger, and every alliance was forged in the fires of ambition. Imagine the hushed grandeur of Whitehall Palace, the rustle of courtiers' robes, the faint strains of lute music, all masking the constant hum of political maneuverings. It was here, in the shimmering cage of power and pretense that a queen, fiercely independent and burdened by the weight of a nation, would harbor a love that defied convention, yet could never claim the crown. This is the story of Elizabeth I and Robert Dudley, a tale where profound affection met the immovable force of duty, leaving behind eternal echoes of agony for what could never be. She was Elizabeth I, a woman forged in the crucible of loss and political peril. Daughter of the executed Anne Boleyn, she had navigated a childhood fraught with uncertainty, imprisonment, and the constant threat of a swift, brutal end. These trials had sculpted her into a monarch of extraordinary intellect, cunning, and resilience. When she ascended the throne in 1558, she was a young woman, barely in her mid-20s, but already possessed of a mind as sharp as a blade and a will as unyielding as the English oak. The crown, however, came with a heavy price, a life lived in the glaring spotlight of public expectation, a constant demand for an heir, and an ever-present loneliness that only a select few were ever permitted to witness. She was the Virgin Queen, a symbol of national unity, yet her private heart harbored desires that constantly clashed with her public persona. Among the throng of ambitious courtiers who flocked to Elizabeth's new court, one figure stood apart, not merely by his charm or lineage, but by a bond that predated the crown itself. He was Robert Dudley, a man of striking appearance, athletic prowess, and a magnetic personality. His family, too, had known the fickle hand of fortune. His father and grandfather had both been executed for treason, but it was their shared childhood, a time spent together in the confined, dangerous royal nurseries and in the shadow of the Tower, that cemented their unique connection. They had been playmates, confidants, fellow prisoners under Mary I. They had witnessed each other's vulnerabilities, supported each other through terror and uncertainty. This was not a love born of first sight or grand gestures. It was a deep, abiding friendship that had blossomed in the hothouse of courtly peril, a silent understanding forged in the crucible of shared adversity. It was the bedrock upon which a more complex, forbidden love would later build. When Elizabeth ascended the throne, the long-simmering affection between them ignited into an undeniable, palpable flame. Her trust in him was absolute, immediate, and startlingly public. He was her master of the horse, a position of great influence, and often seen by her side, riding, hunting, conversing for hours. The court whispered. The foreign ambassadors observed with keen interest. There was an intense, magnetic pull between them, a deep intimacy that surpassed mere friendship. He was the one man with whom she could truly be herself, shed the heavy mantle of sovereignty, and perhaps for a fleeting moment simply be Elizabeth. Her eyes would linger on him. Her hand would rest on his arm. Her words carried a special warmth when addressed to him. It was a love that blazed with an almost reckless abandon, a powerful current drawing them inexorably together, a direct challenge to the rigid expectations of royal decorum. They were the sun and moon of the Tudor court, forever orbiting each other, their unspoken devotion illuminating every corner of the palace. Yet this blazing affection faced insurmountable barriers, casting a long, chilling shadow over their courtly devotion. The most immediate obstacle was Robert Dudley's marriage to Amy Robsart. He was a married man, and a queen marrying a subject, let alone a married one, was unthinkable. Then came the devastating twist of fate. In 1560, Amy Robsart was found dead at the bottom of a staircase. The circumstances were immediately, intensely suspicious. Was it an accident, suicide, or murder? The court, already rife with gossip, exploded into scandal. Whispers of Dudley's involvement, though never proven, clung to him like a shroud. The implications for Elizabeth were catastrophic. Marrying Dudley now, even if he was innocent, would confirm every dark rumor, paint her as a lovesick fool, and potentially trigger a rebellion or even an invasion. Her fierce internal conflict must have been a constant agony, the profound desire for the man she deeply loved, warring with her paramount duty to her kingdom. She, the virgin queen, whose purity was a cornerstone of her legitimacy, could not risk the perception of scandal. Her heart yearned, but her crown demanded abstinence. The dream of shared throne, of a life entwined, was crushed beneath the weight of suspicion and political necessity.
The consequences of this unspoken, unfulfilled love became a perpetual source of day-to-day agony for both Elizabeth and Dudley. Elizabeth, though she openly flirted with foreign princes and entertained countless marriage proposals for political gain, never truly contemplated marrying anyone else. Her heart, for all its power, remained stubbornly tethered to Robert. Yet the constant denial of their public union created a gnawing resentment and fear of loss. Elizabeth, fiercely possessive, found herself tormented by Dudley's other relationships, his necessary courtships for appearance's sake, and the inevitable affections he received from other women. She could not marry him, but she could not bear to see him truly belong to another. This emotional turmoil was a silent battle waged within her regal breast. Dudley, for his part, was consumed by a similar day-to-day torment. He yearned for the ultimate recognition, the public validation of their bond, the intimacy of a shared throne. He held immense power and influence, but he never held the crown he so desperately coveted by her side. This unspoken arrangement, this constant proximity without ultimate union, became a unique form of exquisite torture, a love held in perpetual suspended animation. Despite the barriers, the suspicions, and the inherent pain of their situation, their relationship endured for nearly 3 decades, a testament to its extraordinary depth. They were inseparable companions, his apartments directly adjoining hers. They argued fiercely, laughed freely, and shared an intimate understanding that no one else at court possessed. He was her constant anchor in the turbulent seas of politics, her most trusted advisor, the one person she could truly lean on. Their love, though denied the public ceremony of marriage, flourished in the private moments of their shared lives. They navigated rebellions, foreign threats, and the intricate dance of courtly life side by side. It was a relationship built on deep trust, mutual respect, and a profound underlying affection that defied all logic and expectation. This longevity, this persistence despite every obstacle, marked their bond as truly unyielding. Then, in 1588, as England braced for the Spanish Armada, a shadow fell over Elizabeth's world. Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, her sweet Robin, her eyes, her lifelong companion, succumbed to illness. The news struck Elizabeth with a devastating blow, a grief so profound it threatened to shatter her carefully constructed composure. Imagine the raw, visceral pain of losing the one person who had known her since childhood, who had witnessed every triumph and terror, the man who was, perhaps, the truest love of her life. He had been her rock, her confidant, her constant. She retreated to her private chambers, inconsolable, refusing to eat or leave her room for days until her advisers forcibly intervened. She kept a final letter from him, marked his last letter, in a jewel box beside her bed until her own death, a tangible remnant of the unbearable agony of his loss. His death was not just the passing of a courtier, it was the severing of the last true personal ties she had, leaving her utterly alone on the lonely pinnacle of sovereignty. The relationship between Elizabeth I and Robert Dudley remains one of history's most enduring mysteries and most poignant tragedies. It is a powerful testament to a love fiercely held but forever denied by the inexorable demands of crown and country. Their unspoken union, their profound affection, despite the scandals and the ultimate separation by death, left behind eternal echoes of agony, not of a love extinguished, but of a love that could never fully blossom, forever trapped in the shadow of the throne. It is a testament to the unyielding grip of duty over desire, and the bittersweet beauty of a devotion that chose kingdom over personal happiness.
As the echoes of a queen's denied passion and a courtier's unfulfilled longing fade, let us now step into an era defined by a different kind of love, one of profound devotion, of a partnership that reshaped a monarchy and a nation. Our journey carries us to 19th century Britain, the heart of an empire where industrial innovation met rigid social decorum, where progress marched hand in hand with tradition. Imagine the bustling streets of London, the grandeur of Buckingham Palace, and the intricate machinery of an expanding world. It was here, at the very pinnacle of power, that a young queen, burdened by the immense weight of her inheritance, would find not just a consort, but the very anchor of her soul, only to have it cruelly torn away. This is the story of Victoria and Albert, a love so deeply rooted, so exquisitely felt, that its loss plunged the queen into an abyss of agony, forever staining her reign with the unending tears of grief. She was Victoria, a young woman thrust onto the grandest stage of all. Barely 18 when she ascended the throne in 1837, she inherited a crown often seen as weakened, a monarchy perceived as a shadow of its former self. But Victoria was no mere figurehead. Though small in stature, she possessed an iron will, a keen sense of duty, and a fierce determination to restore the prestige of the monarchy. Yet beneath the formidable exterior of a burgeoning queen lay the vulnerable heart of a young woman who yearned for companionship, for stability, for the kind of unconditional love she had rarely known in her isolated royal childhood. She was surrounded by advisors, politicians, and the endless demands of state, but the personal void remained, a silent ache amidst the clamor of her new life. The question of marriage was of course paramount for a queen. Many suitors were presented, but Victoria, acutely aware of the power dynamics at play, was initially wary, even resistant. She desired not merely a consort, but a partner who would complement, not overshadow, her reign. And then he arrived, Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, her German cousin. He was younger than her, but possessed a quiet dignity, an intellectual depth, and a piercing gaze that conveyed both intelligence and sincerity. Victoria, initially prepared to be reserved, found herself utterly disarmed, captivated. It wasn't a sudden, fiery passion like some tales, but a deep, growing admiration for his quiet strength, his profound sense of duty, his genuine goodness. He was everything she hadn't known she needed, a calm, steady presence amidst the storm of her royal life. She herself proposed to him in 1839, an unconventional act that underscored her unyielding spirit and the undeniable pull she felt towards him. Their marriage in 1840 was not merely a political alliance, it was the foundation of a love story that would redefine royal partnership. What blossomed between them was nothing short of a model of devotion, a love so deeply interconnected that it became the bedrock of the Victorian era. Albert was not content to be merely a figurehead. His keen intellect, his passion for science and reform, his tireless work ethic quickly made him an indispensable partner to Victoria. He reorganized the royal household, initiated social reforms, and conceived of monumental projects like the Great Exhibition of 1851, forever changing the landscape of British industry and culture. Victoria, initially protective of her prerogatives, gradually came to rely on him utterly, trusting his judgment above all others. He became her private secretary, her most trusted advisor, the quiet force behind the throne. Their days were filled with state papers, but also with shared walks, conversations, and the raising of their 9 children, a vibrant, sprawling family that solidified the image of the royal couple. Their letters, filled with expressions of deep affection and mutual respect, paint a picture of extraordinary intimacy. He was her angel, her dearest, purest, best Albert. She was his little wife, his dearest love. These were moments of profound happiness, of shared purpose, a haven of peace amidst the immense responsibilities of empire. Their love was a quiet, steady flame, burning brightly and consistently, a source of unwavering strength for a queen who governed a quarter of the globe. Albert's role was more than that of a husband. He was her closest confidant and strategic advisor. He brought order to the chaotic royal finances, championed education, science, and the arts, and quietly influenced government policy. He drafted her speeches, helped her manage state affairs, and provided the intellectual rigor and emotional stability that Victoria so desperately craved. His contributions were often uncredited, working tirelessly behind the scenes, content to support his beloved queen. This was the profound twist in their relationship. The man who could have sought power for himself chose instead to wield it through her. His ambition channeled into the elevation of his wife and the improvement of the nation. He was the wise oak around which her vibrant vine could grow and flourish. He absorbed her anxieties, celebrated her triumphs, and gently guided her through the labyrinth of statecraft, providing a foundation so sturdy that it seemed unbreakable.
Then, on December 14th, 1861,
the seemingly unbreakable shattered. Prince Albert, just 42 years old, succumbed to what was likely typhoid fever, though later theories suggest Crohn's disease. The news plunged Victoria into a grief so profound, so absolute, that it shook the very foundations of the monarchy. Imagine the raw, visceral pain of a woman who had given her entire being, her entire heart, to one man, only to have him cruelly ripped away. The shock was paralyzing, the despair bottomless. She described the loss as an utter desolation, her life irrevocably cleaved. It was as if the sun had been extinguished from her sky, leaving her in perpetual darkness. The anchor of her soul, the rock of her life, was gone. The agony was not merely emotional, it was physical, a constant gnawing ache that permeated every fiber of her being. She felt his absence in every decision, every lonely meal, every quiet moment in the palace that once hummed with his presence. This moment marked the true turning point of her reign, a descent into a mourning so intense it would define the remainder of her life. The period that followed Albert's death was a long, agonizing twilight of mourning, famously known as Victoria's widowhood. She withdrew almost entirely from public life, rarely appearing in London, preferring the solitude of Osborne House or Balmoral Castle. She dressed exclusively in black for the remaining 40 years of her life, a stark, visible symbol of her unending sorrow. Her personal rooms and belongings, particularly Albert's, were preserved exactly as he left them. His clothes laid out each day, his shaving water brought, his bed prepared, a desperate, almost ritualistic attempt to keep his presence alive, to deny the crushing finality of death. The nation grumbled about her reclusiveness, but her unshakable loyalty to his memory, her unrelenting grief, underscored the profound depth of her love. Her day-to-day agony was a palpable thing, a heavy shroud that draped over her, isolating her on the lonely pinnacle of her throne. She was a queen ruling an empire on which the sun never set, yet she lived in a perpetual internal night, haunted by the memory of her beloved. This self-imposed solitude, this dedication to a ghostly presence, was her unique twist of devotion, a testament to a bond that death could not truly sever. The love of Victoria and Albert stands as an immortal testament to a partnership that transcended the ceremonial duties of royalty and blossomed into a profound personal devotion. Their story is a powerful reminder that even amidst the grandeur and political complexities of a global empire, true affection can flourish, providing solace and strength. Albert's death left Victoria with an unbearable pain, an eternal ache that she carried with her until her own final breath. Their shared life and her subsequent heartbreak reshaped not only the monarchy, but also the very understanding of grief in an era. It is a poignant illustration of how deeply loss can embed itself into the fabric of a human life, defining its later chapters with a daunting longing for what was and what could have been. Their love, though ultimately cut short, left behind eternal echoes of anguish, not for a love unfulfilled, but for a love so truly great, so utterly complete, that its absence became an all-consuming void. As the final echoes of Victoria's enduring grief fade into the quietude, we now venture into a different kind of royal chamber, one cloaked in opulence, yet suffocating with unspoken rules. Our journey transports us to the twilight of the 19th century, to the grand, yet increasingly fragile, Habsburg court of Austria-Hungary. Imagine the glittering ballrooms of the Hofburg Palace, the rigid hierarchy of archdukes and countesses, the hushed whispers of ancient protocol. Here, beneath the dazzling chandeliers, a profound tension simmered, a clash between the glittering facade of empire and the turbulent inner lives of its inhabitants. It was within this gilded cage that a soul destined for a throne, yet longing for oblivion, found a kindred spirit in a forbidden love, leading to a tragic crescendo that would forever haunt the whispers of history. This is the story of Crown Prince Rudolf and Mary Vetsera, a fateful symphony of passion and despair, ending in an agony that reverberates through the ages. He was Crown Prince Rudolf, the sole male heir to the vast Austro-Hungarian Empire, burdened from birth with the immense weight of expectation. He was brilliant, intellectually curious, a progressive thinker for his time, keenly interested in science and social reform. Yet beneath this veneer of promise lay a restless, profoundly unstable soul. He chafed under the stifling formality of court life, the rigid conservatism of his father, Emperor Franz Joseph, and the emotional distance of his eccentric mother, Empress Elizabeth. His childhood had been marked by harsh military training and the lack of genuine affection, leaving him deeply sensitive, prone to melancholy, and tragically haunted by an almost morbid fascination with death. He was trapped in a destiny he never truly embraced, constantly wrestling with the expectations of his lineage and his own yearning for freedom, a freedom he seemed to believe could only be found in ultimate escape. Rudolf's life was a gilded prison. His marriage, arranged for dynastic purposes to Princess Stephanie of Belgium, was devoid of warmth or true companionship. It was a union born of duty, not desire, adding another layer to his profound sense of internal torment. He sought solace in intellectual pursuits, in scientific study, and tragically in fleeting, superficial relationships, none of which could truly fill the immense void within him. He was a bird of vibrant plumage, caged by the very gold that adorned his life, his spirit constantly beating against the bars of expectation. This was the day-to-day agony of a man born to rule, yet yearning to simply breathe. Every court function, every state dinner, every carefully choreographed appearance was a fresh reminder of the life he was forced to live, the future he was compelled to embrace, despite his soul's desperate cries for something more. Then, into this suffocating world of protocol and hidden despair, stepped Mary Vetsera. She was a young baroness, barely 17, yet possessed of a striking beauty, a spirited nature, and a rebellious streak that defied the rigid conventions of the Habsburg court. Her dark eyes, her impulsive nature, her keen interest in the darker, romanticized aspects of life made her a stark contrast to the demure, obedient women expected of her class. When Rudolph, now in his late 20s and deeply disillusioned, encountered Mary, it was like a jolt of raw electricity. She was not a tool for dynastic alliance, not a symbol of duty. She was a vibrant, dangerous spark in his gloomy existence. She saw beyond his title, sensing the restless, wounded soul beneath the imperial facade. Their attraction was immediate, profound, and utterly reckless, a fateful magnetic pull between two souls desperate for release. Their relationship blossomed with a feverish intensity, a clandestine dance of forbidden passion. They met in secret, exchanging notes, stolen glances, and hurried embraces. The danger of discovery only heightened the thrill, the desperation of their connection. For Rudolph, Mary was an escape, a beacon of genuine emotion in a world of artifice. For Mary, she was the dashing, intellectual prince, a romantic figure who offered a world beyond the stifling confines of her aristocratic life. They found in each other a shared understanding, a mutual disillusionment with the world around them, and a terrifyingly potent bond. Their letters, filled with passionate declarations and morbid thoughts, revealed the depth of their connection and the desperate nature of their love. This was not a slow burn, it was a wildfire, consuming them both. But every stolen moment was tinged with the day-to-day agony of secrecy, the gnawing fear of exposure, and the terrifying knowledge that their love defied every rule of their rigid society. Their existence became a series of elaborate deceptions, a constant battle against watchful eyes and wagging tongues, a silent scream of defiance against the very empire Rudolph was meant to inherit.
Crucially, Rudolph and Mary shared a disturbing, almost poetic, obsession with death. This was the dark undercurrent to their passionate affair, the chilling twist that set their story apart. Rudolph, tormented by his mental struggles, his failing health, and the crushing weight of his royal duties, had long contemplated suicide. Mary, young and impressionable, became absorbed in his morbid fascinations, viewing death not as an end, but as the ultimate escape, the final act of defiance against a world that refused to grant them happiness. They spoke of a pact with death, a shared yearning for oblivion that transcended their earthly desires. Their love, therefore, was intertwined with a longing for annihilation, a terrifying solace found in the idea of transcending their pain together. It was a macabre intimacy, binding them not just by passion, but by a shared yearning for the ultimate freedom. The climax of their tragic opera arrived at Meierling, a secluded imperial hunting lodge deep in the Vienna woods. The details remain shrouded in layers of imperial secrecy and contradictory accounts, adding to the enduring haunting aura of the event. On the morning of January 30th, 1889, Crown Prince Rudolph and Mary Vitsera were found dead in his bedchamber. The world reeled. The official explanation was that Rudolph had shot Mary and then himself in a suicide pact. Other theories,
ranging from a political assassination to a botched abortion, have persisted, fueled by the immediate and heavy-handed efforts of the imperial court to suppress the truth. Imagine the profound horror that must have gripped the first witnesses, the chilling silence broken only by the whispers of unimaginable tragedy. The agony here was absolute, a final, definitive surrender to despair. This was not just the end of a love affair. It was the violent, shocking culmination of two tormented souls trapped by circumstance and their own inner demons. The room, once a clandestine haven, became a silent tomb holding the ultimate secret of their shared despair. In the immediate aftermath, the imperial court engaged in an elaborate, desperate cover-up. Mary's body was quickly, secretly removed from Meyerling and buried in a hurried, undignified manner. Rudolph's death was initially reported as a heart attack, then later as a suicide due to a nervous breakdown. The public was fed a carefully constructed narrative, but the whispers persisted, growing louder with each passing year. This frantic attempt to control the story only amplified the mystery and the sense of underlying anguish, turning a private tragedy into a public enigma. The layers of deceit, the deliberate obfuscation of truth, cemented the Meyerling incident as one of history's most compelling and tragic royal mysteries, forever shrouded in the shadows of imperial secrets. The story of Crown Prince Rudolph and Mary Vetsera remains a powerful, haunting symphony of love, despair, and ultimate tragic escape. Their passion, though brief and forbidden, was so intense it shattered the strictures of a powerful empire, leaving behind eternal echoes of agony and a profound sense of what was lost. It is a stark reminder of the immense pressures that can crush even those born to privilege, of the unyielding grip of societal expectations, and the lengths to which two desperate souls might go to find freedom, even if that freedom lies beyond the veil of life itself. Their final shared act was not just a suicide, it was their ultimate act of defiance, a chilling, desperate claim to the only peace they believed they could ever truly find.
As the somber echoes of Meyerling's tragic finality gently recede, let us now step into a different century, a different kind of royal struggle. Our journey brings us to the cusp of the 20th century in Great Britain, a nation still rooted in tradition, yet yearning for modernity, where the stiff upper lip of Victorian propriety clashed with the restless pulse of a new, faster world. Imagine the polished halls of Marlborough House, the rigid protocols of the court, the expectant gaze of a public steeped in imperial grandeur. It was here, amidst the fading glory of an old world and the nascent stirrings of a new one, that a charming prince destined for the highest throne would choose a path utterly unprecedented, a decision that would shake the very foundations of monarchy. This is the story of Edward VIII and Wallis Simpson, a tale where love defied a crown, leaving behind eternal echoes of agony for a choice that reverberated through history.
He was Edward, Prince of Wales, the heir to the British throne, and he embodied the spirit of the emerging age. Charming, handsome, with an effortless charisma that endeared him to the public, he was a dashing figure who seemed to bridge the gap between tradition and modernity. He flew planes, wore fashionable clothes, and embraced a more informal style than his predecessors. Yet, beneath this veneer of carefree charm lay a deeply complex man, restless, somewhat irresponsible, and fiercely individualistic, yearning for a personal freedom that his royal destiny forbade. He craved genuine affection, unburdened by the weight of his future crown, a craving that often led him down unconventional paths. He was a prince adored by millions, yet profoundly lonely, searching for a connection that transcended the ceremonial, a human warmth he rarely found within the confines of his royal duties. Into this world of rigid expectation and guarded emotions stepped Wallis Simpson. She was an American, already twice divorced, with a sharp wit, an independent spirit, and a sophisticated, unconventional charm that was utterly unlike the demure, aristocratic women Edward typically encountered. She wasn't beautiful in the traditional sense, but she possessed an undeniable magnetism, a quick intelligence, and a directness that both intrigued and captivated the prince. She listened to him, challenged him, and most importantly, treated him not as a future king, but simply as a man. For Edward, who had always lived behind a veil of deference, this unvarnished honesty was intoxicating. He was drawn to her independence, her confidence, her ability to make him laugh, to truly see him. Their initial acquaintance quickly blossomed into an intense, all-consuming passion. He was utterly, irrevocably enchanted, willing to defy every convention for the woman who saw beyond the gilded cage of his title. Their relationship, however, immediately became a scandalous affair, an affront to the deeply conservative British society and the very foundations of the monarchy. Edward was dating a married woman, and an American divorcee at that, an unthinkable breach of royal decorum. The agony of their forbidden love began to weigh heavily on Edward. He faced the thinly veiled disapproval of his parents, King George V and Queen Mary, the quiet horror of his siblings, and the growing alarm of the government and the Church of England. Imagine the day-to-day torment of a man torn between the woman he loved and the expectations of an entire nation. He was caught in a cruel trap. His heart yearned for Wallis, but his duty demanded a different path. Yet for all the societal pressure, Edward's devotion to Wallis only deepened. Her strength, her unwavering presence seemed to fortify his resolve. He grew increasingly defiant, choosing to spend more time with her, to flaunt their relationship in the face of widespread condemnation, convinced that his love for her was more powerful than any tradition. The stakes escalated dramatically upon the death of King George V in January 1936, when Edward ascended to the throne as King Edward VIII. Now, the question of Wallis Simpson became not just a social scandal, but a constitutional crisis. As king, Edward was also the supreme governor of the Church of England, which did not recognize divorce, let alone the marriage of a divorced person whose former spouse was still living. The government, led by Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin, made it unequivocally clear: the British people would never accept Wallis as Queen. Edward was presented with an impossible choice: renounce Wallis or renounce the crown. The internal conflict was immense, a soul-wrenching dilemma that tore at the very fabric of his being. How could he betray the woman who had brought him such profound happiness, who had finally seen him for who he truly was? Yet how could he abandon the destiny he had been groomed for since birth? The thousands of years of tradition, the very notion of his sacred duty. The weight of history, the expectations of his family, the future of the monarchy, all pressed down on him with crushing force. In a move that stunned the world and reshaped the course of British history, Edward VIII made his monumental decision. On December 11, 1936, in a radio broadcast to the nation, he announced his abdication, stating that he found it impossible to discharge the duties of king without the help and support of the woman I love. The profound pain of that relinquishment was palpable, even through the crackle of the radio waves. He was giving up not just a title, but a lifetime of training, a sacred duty, the very identity he had known since birth. It was a king's ultimate sacrifice for love, an act of unparalleled devotion that transcended the very notion of empire. This was the ultimate twist, the power of affection proving greater than the allure of the most powerful throne in the world. For Wallis, it was a confirmation of his love, but also a terrifying realization of the immense sacrifice he had made, an unbearable burden of responsibility that she would carry for the rest of her life. Their life together after the abdication was one of perpetual exile, a gilded cage in a foreign land. Renamed the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, they lived primarily in France, a glittering, yet ultimately isolated existence. They were never fully accepted by the British royal family, nor by the upper echelons of British society. Despite the opulence of their homes and the glamour of their social circle, there was an undeniable undercurrent of loneliness and regret. Edward, though he never publicly expressed regret for his choice, often seemed adrift, a king without a kingdom, a man whose purpose had been stripped away. Wallis, for all her spirited defiance, carried the burden of being the woman for whom a king had given up his crown, a constant source of public scrutiny and private day-to-day agony. They were forever defined by that single earth-shattering decision, living out their lives as a testament to the colossal cost of their love. Their love was strong, yet the shadow of the abandoned throne cast a long, cold pall over their days. The story of Edward VIII and Wallis Simpson remains an immortal testament to the astonishing power of personal love to defy the most formidable institutions and expectations. It is a compelling narrative of sacrifice, of a sovereign choosing individual happiness over inherited duty, a choice that still sparks debate and fascination. Their love, which demanded the ultimate renunciation, left behind eternal echoes of agony, not for what was lost in the love itself, but for the world Edward had forsaken, the path he had abandoned. It is a powerful illustration of the unyielding grip of personal desire in the face of monumental responsibility, urging us to contemplate the true value of individual happiness against the crushing weight of public duty. Their tale, forever etched in the annals of history, compels us to reflect on the nature of ultimate choice and the enduring, often bittersweet consequences of following one's heart above all else.
As the profound echoes of a king's sacrifice for love gently recede, let us embark on a final journey, one that takes us from the grand palaces and political machinations to a quieter, yet infinitely more luminous realm. Our journey transports us to Paris at the turn of the 20th century, a city vibrant with artistic and intellectual ferment, where gaslights flickered on cobbled streets and the air crackled with the promise of scientific revolution. Imagine the hum of nascent electrical currents, the scent of chemicals in dimly lit laboratories, and the quiet dedication of minds striving to unlock the universe's deepest secrets. It was here, in this fertile ground of discovery, that two extraordinary souls would find each other, their love a crucible for groundbreaking science, and their shared brilliance illuminating the very fabric of existence, only for one light to be tragically extinguished, leaving behind eternal echoes of agony and an indomitable spirit. This is the story of Marie and Pierre Curie, a love born of intellect and shared passion, forever etched in the stars. She was Marie Skłodowska, a young woman who had journeyed from her native Poland, carrying not only her meager possessions, but also a formidable intellect and an unquenchable thirst for knowledge. In Warsaw, under the oppressive thumb of Russian rule, her opportunities were limited. But Paris, with its Sorbonne University, offered a beacon of hope. She arrived with little money, often subsisting on bread and tea, enduring the biting cold of unheated attics, her body frail, but her mind ablaze with ambition. There was a quiet loneliness about her, the solitude of an immigrant far from home, yet her determination burned brighter than any hardship. Her early years in Paris were a testament to her profound capacity for sacrifice. She taught herself French, meticulously saved every franc from her meager tutoring jobs, and pushed her body to its limits through sheer willpower. She lived in a tiny attic room, often too cold to sleep, too hungry to focus, yet her commitment to her studies never wavered. She pored over textbooks by candlelight, her breath misting in the frigid air, driven by an almost spiritual devotion to the pursuit of scientific truth. She walked miles across the city to attend lectures, her thin coat offering little protection from the elements. These were not mere inconveniences, they were daily tests of her resolve, a quiet, personal agony endured for the sake of a dream. She was methodical, brilliant, driven by a profound curiosity about the natural world, particularly the mysteries of physics. She had no time for superficialities, no patience for societal games. Her world was one of equations, experiments, and the relentless pursuit of truth. She was searching not just for answers in the cosmos, but perhaps unknowingly for a kindred spirit who could truly understand the depths of her scientific devotion. Then, in a twist of intellectual serendipity, she met Pierre Curie. He was already a respected physicist, brilliant in his own right, known for his work on crystallography and magnetism.
He was quiet, contemplative, with a gentle demeanor and eyes that held the depth of a man utterly devoted to scientific inquiry. Their initial meeting was not a passionate storm, but a quiet, profound recognition, an almost immediate intellectual magnetism. Marie, with her sharp questions and unyielding focus, captivated Pierre. He saw in her a mind as rigorous as his own, a passion for science that mirrored his deepest convictions. And she, in turn, found in him not just a brilliant colleague, but a gentle soul who understood her intellectual hunger, her rigorous approach, her very essence. Their love was born not of societal convention or fleeting infatuation, but of a profound reverence for knowledge, a profound synchronicity of minds that transcended mere physical appearance. Their love began in the quiet hum of the laboratory, forged in the shared pursuit of universal truths.
What blossomed between Marie and Pierre was a union unlike any other, a partnership of profound love and unparalleled scientific collaboration. Their shared life became an almost monastic dedication to discovery. They married in 1895, not with grand ceremony, but with a quiet commitment to each other and to science. Their honeymoon was a bicycle tour of France, a testament to their simple joys and shared passion. Their early laboratory was a crude, leaky shed, damp in winter and stifling in summer, with primitive equipment and little funding. Yet, within these humble walls, they embarked on a relentless, almost obsessive quest to understand the mysterious rays emanating from pitchblende, a mineral then dismissed by most. Imagine the day-to-day agony of their work, the endless grinding of tons of ore, the constant exposure to dangerous, unknown substances, the physical exhaustion. The air in their shed was often thick with chemical fumes, their hands burned and cracked from handling acids, their bodies constantly fatigued. They toiled for years, hunched over bubbling crucibles and crude instruments, the outside world oblivious to the titanic struggle unfolding within those walls. But this physical toil was always buoyed by the intoxicating thrill of discovery, the intellectual dance of two brilliant minds pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. They shared every hypothesis, every failed experiment, every tiny triumph. Their hands, often stained and scarred by chemicals, worked in perfect concert, their minds attuned to the same silent language of scientific inquiry. Their love was a quiet, unwavering current beneath the surface of their demanding work, a constant source of strength and solace. Then came the moments of blinding revelation, moments of pure, unadulterated joy that shattered the fatigue and uncertainty. I imagine a night, late, the gaslights flickering low, the air heavy with the scent of pitchblende. They had spent countless hours, days, weeks meticulously refining their extracts, isolating minute quantities of material. Suddenly, a faint, ethereal glow emanated from a dish in the dark. It wasn't a trick of the light. It was an unmistakable, haunting luminosity. This was it. This was what they had sought. The first tangible evidence of a new element, a property so astounding it defied all laws of physics. They must have stood there, side by side, their faces illuminated by that otherworldly light, their hearts pounding in unison.
The quiet shed, usually filled with the clink of glassware and the murmur of their focused conversations, would have been enveloped in a profound silence, broken only by their ragged breaths. Then, perhaps, a shared glance, a hand grasping another's, a silent nod of pure, overflowing triumph. The years of sacrifice, the physical toll, the dismissive skepticism, all melted away in that singular moment of ecstatic realization. When they confirmed their findings, when the world acknowledged the birth of polonium and then radium, their celebration would have been a quiet, profound exaltation, not with champagne and grand parties, but with the quiet satisfaction of minds that had unlocked a cosmic secret, a shared victory that only they could truly comprehend. It was a hymn of discovery, played out in the heart of a cramped, rudimentary laboratory. In 1903, in recognition of their groundbreaking work on radioactivity, Marie and Pierre, along with Henri Becquerel, were jointly awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics. Marie became the first woman to ever win a Nobel Prize. The quiet, solitary scientists were thrust into the global spotlight, their brilliance undeniable. These were moments of immense triumph, a testament to their shared genius and their unwavering belief in each other. They had faced skepticism, hardship, and the immense physical toll of their work, but their shared passion had conquered all, illuminating the hidden wonders of the universe. But even as their scientific star ascended, an insidious threat was silently taking root. The very elements they so passionately pursued, the glowing, wondrous radium, was slowly, imperceptibly, exacting a terrible toll on Marie's body. Pierre, with his keen observational mind, began to see the subtle changes, the constant fatigue, the burns on her hands that wouldn't heal, the slow, creeping pallor that, despite her unyielding spirit, hinted at something far more sinister. Imagine the agony that must have gnawed at Pierre's soul as he witnessed his beloved wife, his brilliant partner, slowly dying before his very eyes, consumed by the very discoveries that brought them fame. He was a scientist, acutely aware of the dangers, yet helpless to stop the slow poison. He would smile at her, offering words of encouragement, discussing their next experiments with an outward enthusiasm that masked the terrifying dread in his own heart. But later, in the privacy of his study, or walking alone through the quiet streets of Paris, the tears would come, the dreadful sobs, stifled and silent for the woman he loved, for the brilliance that was slowly being dimmed, for the future they were losing. The contrast was a daily torment, her spirit fiercely ablaze, fighting against a body that was relentlessly betraying her. He would return from these private moments of despair, wipe his eyes, and return to the laboratory, to her side, offering her the same unwavering support she gave him, masking his own crushing heartache with an almost unbearable grace. This was the silent sacrifice of a man witnessing the slow demise of his world, forced to participate in its unraveling. Then, in a cruel, shattering twist of fate, the unbreakable bond was violently severed. On April 19, 1906, Pierre Curie was tragically killed in a street accident, struck by a horse-drawn carriage in bustling Paris. The news delivered a devastating blow to Marie, plunging her into a despair so profound it seemed to eclipse the very light she sought to understand. Imagine the raw, visceral pain of such a sudden, senseless loss. The man who was her intellectual equal, her beloved husband, the father of her children, her constant companion in both life and science, gone in an instant. The agony was not merely emotional, it was a profound intellectual amputation. She had lost her partner in discovery, the other half of her scientific soul. The world, which had only just begun to truly recognize their combined genius, seemed to mock her with its continued existence. She described herself as a poor atom adrift in the universe. The silence in their laboratory, once filled with the quiet hum of shared thought, became an unbearable torment. This was the ultimate heartache, a wound that would never truly heal, forever etching itself onto her spirit. Yet, from the depths of this unbearable pain, Marie Curie displayed an almost superhuman resilience. Instead of succumbing to her grief, she made a fierce, almost defiant choice. She would continue their work. She took over Pierre's teaching position at the Sorbonne, becoming the first woman to ever lecture there. She raised their 2 daughters, Irène and Ève, alone, and she plunged back into the grueling, dangerous work of isolating pure radium, determined to complete the research they had begun together. This was her day-to-day agony, the constant battle against her own sorrow, against the prevailing sexism of the scientific community, and against the crushing weight of her double burden. There were moments of doubt, of profound loneliness, as she faced ridicule and prejudice as a foreign-born widow, challenging male-dominated institutions. But her will, forged in the fires of personal loss and scientific passion, remained unyielding. She saw herself as carrying on Pierre's legacy, fulfilling their shared dream. Her enduring dedication was not just a testament to her genius, but to the depth of her love, a love that transcended death and transformed into an unbreakable resolve. In 1911, Marie Curie achieved another monumental feat. She became the first person and only woman to win a second Nobel Prize, this time in chemistry, for her isolation of pure radium. She remains the only person to win Nobel Prizes in 2 different scientific fields. Her continued work, her tireless efforts during World War I with mobile X-ray units, and her unwavering dedication to scientific advancement solidified her place as one of history's most iconic figures. Her life, though marked by immense suffering, became a beacon of courage, intellect, and sheer human tenacity. Her legacy was not merely the discovery of new elements, but the proof that the human spirit, even when faced with the most profound losses, can find the strength to continue, to innovate, and to illuminate the darkness. The love of Marie and Pierre Curie stands as an immortal testament to a partnership built on shared intellect, mutual respect, and an unquenchable passion for discovery. Their journey, which began in a humble laboratory and soared to the heights of scientific recognition, was tragically cut short, leaving behind eternal echoes of agony for a love so deep, so symbiotic, that its abrupt end left a void almost unimaginable. Yet Marie's incredible resilience, her unwavering dedication to their shared work, transformed that pain into an even greater legacy, proving the extraordinary strength of the human spirit. Their story compels us to contemplate the profound beauty of true intellectual partnership, the immense power of shared purpose, and how even the most devastating losses can forge an unyielding will to carry on, forever illuminating the path for others. As you now drift into the tranquil depths of your sleep, let the whispers of their devotion and the quiet brilliance of their discoveries guide your dreams, a reminder of the extraordinary potential that lies within the human heart and mind. As these tales of love, loss, and enduring human spirit settle into your thoughts, may they bring you a sense of peace. If this journey through history's heartbeats has brought you solace, please like this video, subscribe for more stories, and share your reflections in the comments. May your dreams be as profound as the histories we've explored.